will be okay. Good morning, committee members. Welcome to the Maricopa Regional Continuum of Care Committee meeting. For all participants, please mute your phone or computer when not speaking. Do not put yourself on hold. For all participants, we ask that you please identify yourself when speaking for people who are listening in or watching. Committee members, please remember, don't use the chat function as the watching audience cannot see it. We will now ask Katie to proceed with roll call. Please indicate you are here and your organization after she calls your name.
Dawn Bogart.
Sorry, forgot to unmute. Good morning, everybody. Dawn Bogart, Homeless Youth Connection.
Thanks, Dawn. Vanessa Cartel.
Present.
Vanessa's with ABC. Sylvia Chavez.
Good morning, Sylvia Chavez, the Arizona Department of Education Homeless Education Program.
Allison Cook Davis. Erin Cohen Haig.
Good morning, everyone. Erin Cowan Haig, Save the Family.
Jessica Cruz.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Jessica Cruz, Housing Authority of Maricopa County.
Kathy Dinolfi.
Good morning, Kathy Dinolfi, new lead.
DC Ernst. Nicole Gibson.
Nicole Gibson, UMOM.
Anne-Marie Johnston.
Ann Johnston, Community Bridges.
Christina Lopez. Marcy McFarland.
Marcy McFarland, Home Inc.
Jim McPherson.
Hi, Jim McPherson, Phoenix Community Alliance.
Jennifer Page.
Good morning, Jennifer Page, Mercy Care.
Gerardo Pena.
Hi, Gerardo Pena, Chicanos por la Causa.
Aaron Rain. Ty Rosensteel.
Hi, Rosensteel from Solari.
Shayla Schuster.
Shayla Schuster, Community Solutions.
Sarah Sims.
Present, Phoenix Elementary School District number 1.
Thank you. Laura Scott Nicky. Michelle Stokes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jocelyn Wilkinson.
Good morning, everybody. Jocelyn Wilkinson, Arizona Department of Veteran Services.
Co-chair Richard Cruz.
Richard Cruz, Human Services Candidates, present.
Thank you. Co-chair Wendy Johnson.
Wendy Johnson, Justice Center. I am here as well.
Did I miss anybody?
Hi, Katie. It's Allison Cook Davis from Morrison Institute.
Thanks, Allison. Anyone else? All right. With that, you have a quorum. Back to you, Co-chair Johnson.
Thank you, Katie. The next item on the agenda is the call to audience. Members of the public were given an opportunity to submit written comments relating to this meeting at azmag.gov/comment within 1 hour of the posted start time for the meeting. Or they can join the Zoom meeting by requesting a link from MAG staff or registering on the COC committee meeting event page. If you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand in Zoom and you will be invited to unmute at that time. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any comments or anyone who's joined the call to offer comments?
Co-chair Johnson, we have not received any comments and no one at this time has raised their hand in the audience.
Awesome. Thank you. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the approval of the July 13th, 2022 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have questions or comments on the minutes? Crickets. Okay, nobody has anything. Could I have a motion to approve the July 13th, 2022 Maricopa Regional Continuum Care Committee meeting minutes?
Richard Cruz, so moved.
We have a motion from Richard Cruz. And do we have a second?
I will second.
And who was that? I didn't.
Marcy McFarland. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcy McFarland. All right. Is there any discussion on their motion? Katie, we're back to you with a roll call vote. When Katie calls your name, please state yay or nay after your name is called.
Thank you, Co-Chair Johnson. Don Bogart. Donna, thank you. Vanessa Gartzell.
Yay.
Thank you. Sylvia Chavez.
Yay.
Allison Cook Davis.
Yay.
Aaron Cohen Haig. Aaron, you are on mute. Jessica Cruz.
Yay.
Kathy Dinolfi.
Yay.
DC Ernst. Nicole Gibson.
Yay.
Anne Marie Johnston.
Yay.
Christina Lopez. Marcy McFarland.
Yay.
Jim McPherson.
Aye.
Jennifer Page.
Yay.
Gerardo Pena.
Yay.
Aaron Rain. Ty Rosensteel.
Yay.
Shayla Schuster.
Yay.
Sarah Sims.
Abstain. I wasn't in the meeting last month.
Thank you. Laura Scott Nicky. Michelle Stokes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jocelyn Wilkinson.
Yay.
Co-Chair Richard Cruz.
Yay.
Co-Chair Wendy Johnson.
Yay.
Any folks that I missed that would like to vote on the minutes from last meeting?
Yay, Laura Scott Nicky. Sorry, I'm late.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else? Thank you. The motion passes unanimously. Back to you, Co-Chair Johnson.
Well, I'm going to hand it right off to Richard Cruz for our next agenda item.
Hello, everybody. The written updates were included in the packet, including the legislative update. Does anyone have any questions about the update memo or have discussions on the legislative update? Okay, so I have a different question. Would you like to receive the updates differently? Because I do not believe that we just want to look at each other. I mean, y'all are all beautiful, beautiful and handsome, whatever, however you want to identify it. But like for the last 3 months, this has come up, and like we're like crickets. And there's too much going on the streets, in our work, and in the collective work across the continuum. That like when this update piece comes up, we just crickets. So is there a different way that you'd like us to address updates, or like even call people to say like, hey, like you're here, so do you want to give us an update in the future?
Hi, Richard. It's Sylvia Chavez.
So yeah.
I love the written updates, but it would be nice to have maybe a quick summary from each subcommittee, like verbally, just to give the members a chance to ask questions. Maybe it would be easier instead of to talk, to ask a question to the person directly opposed to picking it off a page.
Thank you, Sylvia. I appreciate that. Other thoughts around that?
I was just going to echo exactly what Sylvia said. So I think it's a great idea.
Okay, yeah. So let's work towards that for next month. Yeah, because I know you all read. I know you do, but some of you don't. So because some of you don't, like I want to make sure the information still gets to everybody, so that this way we can be informed. And it's about at times like we have to dictate agenda, not just have agenda set. And like yeah, I just thoroughly believe that there's too much going on outside, and we are the ones that are at the wheel. So like when our grandkids or great grandkids are playing with us and they're like, hey, there's 10,000 people that are homeless in Maricopa County. Like, what was that like? And you can't say, well, I don't know because I wasn't there. It's like, no. We were the ones that were the decision makers and the ones that actually were at the helm of the ship. As the ship sailed in, we were like, hey, let's go into the iceberg. So let's not do that. And or let's not see like we're going towards an iceberg, but nobody want to talk about it, right? We have to be able to be informed and like definitely have this be a space where we're pushing, right? And doing, like I said, this is about dictating agenda in some cases. So Moving on to the next agenda item. Thank you for those who spoke. Stephanie.
Oh, Chair Cruz, can I stop you for a second? We have a couple of people with hands raised.
Oh, I did not see it. Okay, we're gonna go Vanessa, then we'll go to Ty. Go ahead, Vanessa.
Thank you, Co-Chair Cruz. Vanessa, ABC. I was just reading over the Coordinated Entry Subcommittee update and was wondering if there was if we could have an update on the status of assessment in Coordinated Entry and how we are progressing on either adapting the VI SPDAT or going to a new assessment. Because I know, that's something that was in the racial equity report. And so I would like a regular update on how that's going.
So Vanessa, I was here actually to give an update on Coordinated Entry either way. So I'm happy to add that. So one of the things with regards to that, so right now we are in the middle of the Coordinated Entry evaluation by home base. And so a lot of the work that we've been wanting to do, I think, surrounding the VI SPDAT and other aspects of equity with regards to Coordinated Entry are kind of, I wouldn't say on hold, but we're kind of waiting for some of the results from that to come back before we do make any movement on that. I know that there's been a lot of thoughts and discussions and a lot of different options or availability, like whether it's a new tool, whether it's a modification of the existing tool, or whether it's the creation of a new tool. There's lots of ideas, I think, flowing in the community right now, and we're kind of waiting for some results from home base so that we could actually take that information and kind of proceed. I do think that looking at the tool that's in existence right now will be one of the first things that we'll be wanting to look at. But I do want to stress, I think for Coordinated Entry with race equity, we're not just going to be looking at the tool, it's going to be looking at the entire continuum of Coordinated Entry, because I think the tool is, I think, the obvious thing to look at. However, I think equity across the entire system is going to be important to take into account as we're kind of evaluating. So I know that's not probably what you wanted to hear, that there's this wonderful tool waiting, but it's at least kind of where we're at. Are there questions about that?
Is there a timeline for when home base will be done and make those recommendations?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I actually, Nicole, have been asking the same question. And so what I'm hearing is sometime between October and November, we should have some results back from them. My understanding, and Meg, you all tell me, you might know some more of the details, but home base has been looking to set up some time to come to Phoenix to do some focus groups and identify areas. And I think that's going to be happening sometime next month, with the results sometime in October or November. So, and then from there, home base will be available going forward from there once we have the results to assist with some of the implementation efforts as well.
So, Madam Co-Chair and Sir Chair or Sir Co-Chair, may I add to that?
Yes.
We have actually asked home base, we've given them a really narrow window to reach out to stakeholders in September because of the dual NOFOs that are out at the moment. We didn't want to further tax stakeholders with having to do Coordinated Entry assessment on top of trying to get their applications completed at the same time. So the original timeline with home base has been extended by 6 weeks to try to allow stakeholders an opportunity if they are applying to do so. And so we do expect to have results this fall, but because of that, because we don't know quite yet who all is applying, and we don't know what stakeholders may want to participate in the assessment quite yet, or the review, the timeline is changing, is what I'm saying. We can have firmer dates for you at the next meeting if that's of interest.
Thank you. I like Kelly. Kelly understands her parliamentary procedures and all that fun stuff. I'm grateful for that. Todd.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share that I actually really like the format of the written summaries from the committees. I think that there have been times in the past where we've tried to do presentations on every committee, and that takes a lot of time. And I think the piece that I really like is what we actually just saw from Vanessa was someone that had read the review and specifically identified an action item that came from there that would be a good conversation and presentation to this group. So I would encourage us to, instead of trying to get presentations on every single one of these, to really instead make the commitment to review and identify what are actionable items for this group that we could make note of. The other piece that I wanted to share is that I think that this type of document is also something really useful to stakeholders outside of just this committee. And there used to be a time where there was sort of a, I don't know if it was weekly or monthly, but some type of kind of debriefing of the activities of the continuum of care and kind of hyperlinked all of these documents so that it was a little bit more accessible. So just as an example, in the document where it discusses the Continuum of Care Board, it says the Continuum of Care Board approved the supplemental NOFO scorecard and also changes to the board charter. Since I know how to navigate the MAG website and can look up minutes and agendas, it wasn't too hard for me to go in and find the board charter. But it would be really nice if those were hyperlinked to say, here's the board charter that was approved. You just have to click on it and then you can see it. There's a little bit of homework that you have to do if it doesn't have those types of linkages. So I would request, if we could, I would prefer sort of a more dynamic written statement and more of what Vanessa just did, which is identifying the pieces that are really actionable for us.
Thank you, Ty. I definitely would echo that. Wendy, you're muted.
Sorry, that was an internal problem. I wasn't speaking. Sorry.
Yeah, like Ty, I would definitely echo that, and I think we can find a balance with that. Just like I don't want us to just look at each other, I also don't want us to just talk for the sake of talking and hearing for the sake of hearing, but not doing for the sake of doing. Right? Like we got to do something. And so I definitely agree that like being able to pick apart what those key pieces are super important, and bringing those actionable conversations into the space. Just want to make sure that we are valuing everybody's time, because we can look at each other at happy hour, but like here we should do. So thank you so much for that, and I wholeheartedly echo your sentiment. If there's no other comment, I'm going to move forward in the agenda to the next item. So next we have the system flow dashboard. Stephanie Crum will provide a recap on the systems flow dashboard. Stephanie, it's all yours.
Hello, good morning, committee. Thank you for having me, Stephanie with Solari. Let me go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get into some numbers. All right, if this is the first time you're seeing this dashboard, I'd just like to point out that on your landing page, there is some good information about the populations that we're talking about, as well as the dashboard definitions and how someone will land themselves on the by name list or how someone would be excluded from the by name list, and also what we're specifically talking about when we're talking about positive exit destinations. So let's go ahead and get into our active overview. So as you can see, from May to June, we did see a significant increase here, about 8% overall from May to June. And then that was, as a numbers game, is mostly driven here by singles, but I do want to point out that there is also still a rise in families. This line isn't quite as dramatic, but it's still showing about a 10% increase overall in families. As we move down to subpopulations, we can see again that it's really just a system-wide increase here. We do have a couple populations who are feeling this a little bit harder than the others, and that is our BIPOC population here, and then also our unsheltered. Historically, these two populations do track pretty close together, and it's hot out, so this is concerning, whenever we see a rise in unsheltered. I mean, this is about a 9% rise here, and same with the BIPOC population, it's about a 9% rise. One thing that you don't see too much down here is the youth population. I just wanted to call that out because, again, the line isn't as dramatic because the population is smaller in numbers, but they're experiencing about a 12% rise in this population from May to June, from 414 to 464. And then again, if you're on this page, and you want some deeper definitions of what these populations are capturing, that is there at the bottom for you. And then over to our flow details page. Again, you're just seeing an overview here of the overall active homeless number and that increase. But as you scroll down, we'll look at our total inflow and outflow. And as you can see, from May to June, our inflow was outpacing our outflow here by about 600. And then we've got our inflow detail. So who are these folks that are coming into our system right now? Who's contributing to this rise? And we're seeing that there is a significant increase in new clients, but oops, this is kind of hard to call out here. There we go. Significant increase in new clients here, but also in return from inactive. And this is pretty typical of our summer months. A lot of folks who are seeking heat relief services will come in to seek those services in the summer months. Our outflow detail, we pretty much have a leveling off here of unknown negative exits. And then we do see a rise here in some positive exits to housing. So that's always a win. I always want to call that out and celebrate that. Does anybody have any questions on the system flow dashboard before I turn it back over?
I have a quick question, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So we were at the housing supply meeting down at the Capitol yesterday, where several agencies were, just kind of giving an overview of what they're seeing in their shelters and transitional housing. And everyone was reporting an increase in seeing elderly ages between 55 and over in their shelter. And I just wanted to see if we're seeing that reflective in our dashboard.
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. And the elderly population has seen an increase too. I mean, across the board, everyone saw a 7% increase, and the elderly population did as well. So we are just seeing, you see this trend line really since about October of last year. We're really just creeping up, and then now we're starting to see like what they're describing as a bigger jump in the elderly population.
Okay, thank you.
Jocelyn, Stephanie, can I add to that too? We're also seeing an increase in elderly year over year. So we've seen about a 20% increase since this time last year, which is a concern, and that's a bigger jump than other populations specifically. So month to month, like we've kind of continuously seen this rise of 7%, but year over year, it's been quite a bit larger.
Hi, Chairman Johnson and everyone. About the seniors, I know that Cynthia Zwick with Wildfire and her team are looking at the issue and are putting together I don't know about a plan of action, but a response to some of the things that they can do to help resolve, mitigate, work on that issue.
Awesome, thank you.
Wendy.
Jim, that's good news. Thank you for sharing. We are piloting a program out in the West Valley to work on prevention of seniors moving into homelessness. And we're getting 75 calls a month from seniors whose leases are not being renewed, or the rent increase is so large that they can't handle it. And the issue is there is no affordable housing to move them to. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but this is going to get worse. And I will admit that this is a tough point for me right now. But if Social Security is cut in any way, we could be looking at a crisis of 400,000 seniors here in the Valley homeless within 90 to 120 days. That's a lot of people. And so for me, it's a political issue. We need to get in front of our legislators about this, but it's also a sense of urgency for housing options for seniors.
Thank you, Wendy. Jocelyn.
I feel like I should put my hand down. I think Wendy kind of hit the head on the nail. I was going to see what we could do as a committee to do some political pull on this. I know a couple of the politicians that are a part of the housing supply are really concerned about the elderly. There was actually a gentleman there in Sun City who gave a very moving testimony of living in a retirement community, and over half of that community had to move out or relocate due to non-renewals and just the rent skyrocketing. So I do agree, Wendy, that we have to do something as a COC to, I don't know what our pull is or what resources we can pull together for this community. But just having elderly homeless just seems asinine to me. It's just unfathomable to have elderly folks on the street. So just wanted to point that out and see what we could do as a committee.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Yeah, I wonder if there's opportunity, especially isolating those that that their primary was their election, so we know they're going to be around for the next legislative cycle, to have some conversations in those spaces. Because, like I said, sometimes you have to dictate the agenda as opposed to just set it. And so, in terms of being actionable, I think that I don't want to create a committee to just create another subcommittee or another ad hoc committee, but I think there's ability to take a look at that and then put that as an action item that we can follow up on, as far as even identifying who are the potential pressure points that we can look at for the next election cycle. Well, not for the like I said, for the next legislative cycle, and start having conversations now, because we can do that. Whether we do that as the COC or we do that as members, just in our individual spheres of influence, I think we have the ability to do so. So let's continue to discuss that. And I love this conversation because the data is largely what the data is, and I love data, so I don't ever want to take data away. But at some point, we also have to ask ourselves. So next month, I anticipate Stephanie's going to bring us the data. The numbers are going to be higher, but the trends are going to be exactly what the same trends are. And then we're going to have to ask ourselves, okay, so it's at that point September, and for the last 9 months, we've seen it do exactly what it's doing. And so at some point, what are we going to do about it? Michelle.
Now, one of the things that has come up in another group is that we have silos dealing with aging. We have silos dealing with disability. And in the senior population or the aging population, they're they're combined, because you have more disability elements in the senior population. And I'm wondering if there's a way that the chronic groups can address aging groups as well. I mean, I know that's not the typical layout, but there's so many overlapping areas that might be helpful.
Agreed. Thank you, Michelle. Yes. Yeah. So that can also be another piece that we reach out to the chronic subcommittee and what the chronic work group is working on. Stephanie, you about to talk? This is got you highlighted.
That's my dog, sorry.
Oh, all good. To be able to figure out so I was just doing, before I came on, I was doing the orientation for the interns from ASU, and we were talking about collective impact and how collective impact, really making sure how are we moving all in the same direction around this particular issue, and what the work is and whatnot. And Michelle, I think that's a really key piece around that. Also, for those of you that went to the NAH conference, one of the things that I would also like to point out is that communities working on equity are making equity that's the conversation, right? And so it can't be I liken it to sometimes we include equity, but we talk about equity like R&B singers do, right? And so that's where you put the song at the end of the album, as opposed to putting it at the front of the album. When we put it at the front of the album, in terms of talking about yes, with all of these, there's really interesting things going on with these trends. And I believe that whether we're talking about elderly or disability, or the ability community or youth, like these are all things that are like tragic for our community. But also like that roller coaster that looks like the BIPOC trend, like that data line, I wouldn't want to be on that roller coaster. That roller coaster looked kind of scary to me, right? And so like we have to be able to walk and chew gum. And as we walk and chew gum, like what are the priorities that we're really like hitting and like unapologetically talking about? Because if we're not unapologetically talking about it, then like we're okay with it at the end of the day. And so being able to think differently around how we're having this discussion, I think sometimes is really powerful. Vanessa.
Just wanted to address the question about the chronic work group. We do have 2 specific goals that we're working towards. And as far as elderly, I think to myself, is the elderly population, is that mostly first time homelessness, or is that because otherwise, it's not going to fall into the chronic category? So I wonder how much those 2 populations overlap. And then second, I think about that elderly should be a consideration also for the subcommittee, the coordinated entry subcommittee, looking at assessment and how that prioritizes age.
Co-Chair Cruz, can I respond to Vanessa really quickly? I think, Vanessa, you bring up a really good point of the folks that are chronic, we're actually not seeing they're aging into elderly rather than elderly who are aging into chronicity. So the elderly folks that we are seeing more than ever before, especially like that kind of anecdotal, I can't afford my rent anymore and I can't find an affordable place to live, aren't going to be folks that are looking into the chronic, who are in the chronic space. And so looking at how does disability and elderly align more than chronic and elderly align is probably the direction that we need to start to look at to hit Michelle's point of we have not working in our silos. So I think that's some data that we can further look into outside of just the dashboard.
Thank you, Katie. I'm gonna go. So Wendy, I'm gonna go to Allison first. She hasn't spoken yet today, and then I'll go to you.
Hi. Yes. I think this is a really important issue, and in hearing Michelle's voice around sort of looking at sort of the sort of disability population within the elderly is also really important. And I'm wondering if the approach from like a sort of policy and strategies perspective is also maybe not focusing just on chronic, but trying to look at like potentially what are options, policy options, and models that can be encouraged to prevent, homelessness before it happens, right? Not when they're already in sort of this sort of chronic state. And if there is a large number of seeing more and more individuals who are experiencing homelessness who are older is certainly concerning, but it sounds like we're also sort of on this precipice of like potentially a lot more people being impacted. And those individuals may have other sort of intersectionalities like homelessness, mental health, and they could be veterans, right? Like these are all sorts of intersectionalities that probably would need to be looked into in sort of seeing what sort of options or models that could be encouraged. Because I think that, sort of in terms of, providing something to sort of legislators and stuff like that, having sort of concrete ideas on kind of what that might look like, I think is the most effective. I think, having a good quantification of the problem is certainly helpful, but also having some kind of recommendations or how to kind of move the needle forward or toward prevention even is also important. And so I'd be very interested to look into that if others are amenable. I don't know if that's appropriate for this particular subcommittee either, so.
I think there's good energy around this conversation that'll definitely pop up at the end of this meeting when it comes to what are future agenda items that we need to be able to look at and dive into. I'm gonna go Wendy, Kathy, and Dawn, and Chayla, right? Did I say it right today? Okay, well, I'm gonna go that way, right? And then I gotta close it because we gotta move because we got other stuff we gotta talk about, right? So the line that is the line that is. And now if you're getting it on the ride, you gotta wait until next time. Okay, Wendy, go ahead.
I would be willing to start a small subcommittee to deal with this because it's a hobby horse I've been on for 4 years, and I didn't get ahead of it as fast as I should because of COVID. But I would welcome Michelle and Allison and anybody else to sit down. If you want to email me, and we'll put a meeting together and talk about what our possibilities are. I was going to ask Kelly or Katie Gentry if the supplemental NOFA, if there is funding for housing retention in that.
Katie, do you want to answer that?
Yes, our population is not, we have not reached the level of being able to do prevention because we have too many people actively experiencing homelessness. So continuum of care dollars, we cannot do prevention. However, ESG funds, which work hand in hand with continuum of care, and we have 6 ESG funders in the Valley through local jurisdictions are able to fund prevention. And then we have kind of a number of other ways to fund prevention. Folks do have to be actively homeless though in order to use COC funding on them.
Okay, that's great. But yeah, I thank you all for your investment in this.
Thank you. Kathy.
Yeah, just a quick question regarding the data. How are victims of domestic violence that present tracked or tracked with respect to coordinated entry? If that's their presenting issue, they're homeless due to domestic violence.
Stephanie.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure if that was for me or not. My dogs might start barking, so I apologize. Someone's at the door. But yeah, right now, the domestic violence and victim service agencies do not enter into HMIS. I think Matthew Kelly could probably give a better update on this, but right now we are working in the coordinated entry subcommittee to work on getting coordinated entry and domestic violence integrated. We started a pilot in July of working through that, where domestic violence providers, some shelters are sending data to Solari to a secure email account, and we are matching that with coordinated entry data and sending that to the leads and then back to the shelter. So we're working on integration. It's something that just hasn't historically happened in the past, but we do feel strongly needs to happen. So that's kind of where we're at right now. If I left anything out, Matthew, please jump in there. But that's kind of where we're at as a system.
Thank you, Stephanie. I know Dana from our agency is very involved in coordinated entry for DV victims. I just didn't know if their presenting issue is homelessness, and that's what drove them to coordinated entry, and then they disclose DV. If then their information is captured as homeless versus then being integrated into the DV.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think that would be a good question for the SACE leads to see what it looks like on that side when folks are presenting in the homeless system first before presenting in the domestic violence system.
Did you have anything to add?
Double dutching on his mute button.
I will also add, and this has been kind of announced in the DV space, but part of the Continuum of Care annual notice of funding opportunity is money specifically set aside for domestic violence and domestic violence projects. So we've continued to kind of really raise that awareness opportunity and see if folks who are working in the domestic violence space are interested in that. We will be holding an office hour specifically for domestic violence projects next week, and we'll be sending out an email to answer kind of what is applicable and not applicable for a funding source that you all have not typically applied for in the domestic violence space. And so look for an email from us on that for an early next week meeting if folks are interested.
Done.
Just, and I'm not sure if this is the correct place to do it, but just kind of addressing what Allison and Wendy were talking about in terms of our seniors. Has our community ever considered rent control with very specific guidelines in terms of individuals on a fixed rent or, you know, seniors that have disabilities or what have you, but just again, what Allison was saying, look at other models. And I know that there's been rent control in other places. Would it be something that our community would consider? And if so, how would we go about presenting that to who, you know, the powers that be? Just a thought.
Would we have to change the state constitution? It's currently, yeah, so we'd have to change the state constitution, Don, as it is explicitly stated in the state constitution. Like we can't do that, but that doesn't mean we can't do that, right? It's just a matter of whether there's a will, there's a way, creating a strategic approach to lobby for those things, just as the other side, not politically, just the other side, period, lobbies against our community, people to also raise our voices in different ways and strategize in various ways to be able to have those kinds of conversations.
So Chair Cruz, can I add, this is a great conversation for the Housing Study Committee. This was something that was brought up yesterday, was rent control. As Co-Chair Cruz mentioned, there is a preemption at the state law, but that is a legislative issue that could potentially change based off of public feedback. So definitely encourage you to attend those housing study committees. As Jocelyn mentioned, there was a number of different testimonies from people who are experiencing this yesterday during that meeting.
Okay, so I'm gonna go to Shayla. Did I say it right though? Or I messed up? Okay.
Yeah.
And then Jim, I gotta move because we weren't supposed to stay on this that long. So
It was short.
okay, so it was short. Okay, so
I'm sorry, Lisa Glow is interested in the issue of rent control.
okay, thank you for letting us know that. Shayla.
I guess I just have a couple of things, and I'm not exactly sure where they can plug in, but I mean, I think when we're talking about seniors, we really need to start looking at our adjacent systems and who's like that, where are the largest inflows coming from? Is it evictions? Is it, and where are some of the adjacent systems that are serving those populations, like senior centers? Are they coming in to get utility assistance? And where can we, food, things like that? Where can we really start looking at like turning off the spigot where it starts? And then the other thing, I feel compelled to say this is a housing affordability issue. If we're going to see it with seniors, we're going to see it with families as well. So I think we really need to be prepared for thinking about that. And I think we've got to continue to take a holistic view of our system, and we can have subpopulations and systems working on those, but they've got to be talking to each other. And we need to understand how our system works together and how populations are flowing in and out of different places, because again, that's how we're going to turn off the spigot of the inflow.
So true. So thank you all. Like y'all got me in my happy facilitator space because everybody's talking and we're talking about things that are actionable. So that's very exciting. We do have to move to the next agenda item. There have been numerous discussions regarding the naming of the COC committee, the COC board, and through the communication plan. I'll now open it up for discussion to the committee for suggestions and recommendations. Does anybody have any suggestions?
Co-Chair Cruz, I would like to kind of give a little bit more kind of story behind this. So there's been kind of some misunderstanding for many years. This is not something new, and this has just kind of been risen as homelessness has become more of a subject matter across the community. And so two things that I want to get feedback from you all on. all of the subcommittees we are renaming to committees. You all are lateral and report directly to the board, and we are doing a better job of trying to communicate between you all before things go to the board. So everything that you all brought up in your update section of, yeah, it would be really helpful to learn more about the coordinated entry evaluation. Those kind of updates will go between different committees. But also with that, the COC committee does not mean a lot to people outside of people who live and breathe the continuum of care. And so this has kind of been brainstormed over some time. Jim McPherson kind of has continued to raise the alarm bells, for lack of a better description, on this lack of understanding across the community. And so Jim, don't want to steal your thunder, but he came up with a variety of different options that folks could react to or potentially brainstorm more around. And then we're hoping to really bring this forward to the board for an approval to rename you all into something besides just committee. So the four that he kind of brainstormed around were community engagement committee, community collaboration committee, stakeholder engagement committee, or partner engagement committee. So I will take a second to pause and then let Co-Chair Cruz kind of lead you through this discussion.
I know we're not supposed to put stuff in the chat, Katie, but can you put it in the chat so we can like visually see it? Or if you want to put it in a Word document and share it, like to throw it up on the screen, however that would be, but I think it'd be helpful for us to be able to look at it as we work our way through it.
Madam Co-Chair and Sir Co-Chair, we could also create a survey monkey with the options and have folks vote.
Yes.
And also provide a space for other, so in case they have an idea that they prefer, we could capture that as well. We are not able to use the chat because of open meeting law.
Yes, okay, so don't, I did not ask you to chat, yeah, that's it. So like if from an action standpoint, we can create a survey monkey, but like immediate reactions, feelings about like any of those names, or saying like we're the COC committee and you want to stay as the COC committee because of like how that has precedent across like various communities. I'm open to hear. We're all open. Wendy. Oh no, you weren't talking. Okay, you just got highlighted. Okay, so this is what I'm going to ask, since nobody's saying anything about this one way or the other. I would like to follow Kelly's recommendation. Oh, Jennifer. Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to ask if other communities name their continuum of cares how we have it established now, because I wouldn't want to make changes and not align with other communities.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Like, how does that, what's the consistency of that across various other communities? Like, do other communities have COC committees?
I will say they vary far and wide across we've looked at, I don't know, probably 50 different COC structures by this point. Some have a committee. Really, I would say a lot of what you all put in your charter as the committee is like tangible action moving the work forward, and the board is more of a policy direction. You're one of the few that is called a COC committee, and there are lots of names all across the board for a lot of different things, and including our other 7 lateral committees that are lateral to you. There are a lot of names for those as well. We haven't seen a ton of consistency across the board.
Thank you, Katie. Laura.
I was just going to say that I participate in New Mexico and Southern Nevada, and it's a committee.
Like, it's a committee in terms of it's the COC committee?
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much. Other feedback? Wendy, then Jim.
My only feedback is if we're going to change the name, regardless of what it is it to get people outside to know what we do, or is it for us to be identifying what we do? Because those are two very different messages, in my opinion.
Agreed. Before I go to Jim, does anyone have any thoughts on what Wendy said as far as, like, if we're going to change the name, like, for what purpose would you want to change the name? Like, is it around creating clarity? And is it clarity for us, or is it clarity for people on the outside? Like, what does that look like? So Marcy, do you have a response to that? Or is it a different comment?
Well, I mean, it's a question. Are we a housing committee? I mean, do we want to specify like what it is, you know, to your point of the action that we're doing or what we're talking about versus just the continuum of care, which is, you know, a larger umbrella of our area. So just that question, do we want to specify like what it is we're trying to do?
Thank you, Marcy. Jim.
So discussion is great from the standpoint, that's, I think, why we need a new name for our committee, which again is not the board. It's to differentiate, at least in my initial thought process, you know, the same community of Continuum of Care board, Continuum of Care committee. There's the confusion, I think. So, and I'm all for a survey monkey. I think that's great. Having this discussion first to sort of tee this up, and then the survey, I think, would be very helpful. And to Chairwoman Johnson's point about you know, description, definitely have a description of each of the subcommittees should have descriptions, both for internal use and for external use. If those need to be updated, you know, that's fine and dandy.
Chair Cruz, I will add to this discussion. We have had a number of folks not necessarily understand the difference between the board and the committee who are externally applying to sit as we start to pull in additional community partners that aren't necessarily living and breathing in the homelessness space. So as we pull in businesses or schools or the domestic violence partners or things like that, I think that's where this initial conversation started out, is how do we create more clarity for partners we want to pull into this space.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. Other thoughts? Jim, can I ask if you would work with Katie around creating a survey monkey that both has like these four options, as well as like a question or two around like, why do you think it would be most effective to rename, or do you want to keep the name as it is? And then this way we can come back with that information next month and then potentially move based on that deeper dive of information.
Chairman Cruz, I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Okay. Katie, you good with that?
I would just give a shout out to our amazing staff member who already sent me an email with a started survey monkey. So we will get those additional questions added.
Okay.
Well, my work is done then.
Thank you all. Okay, so we're gonna move. Wendy Johnson, our co-chair, will provide an update on next steps for the community adopted best practices document. Wendy, go ahead.
Unmute, start with. Several months ago, Katie proposed us working on these community best practices so that we had a unified approach. You have received that in your packet, and thank you for sharing it on the screen. The MAG team did a ton of heavy lifting on this to get us standards that we could self-assess, as well as expectations of groups entering this space, what they can do. A lot of time was invested in language, because language mattered, and we wanted to make sure that the wording made sense. And so I would really appreciate, you guys looking at this from a perspective of does it make sense for someone reading it, or do you have to be part of the group to understand it? And which is like the COC committee name. So we're looking for a vote and approval of this document to go to the board approval later this month. I hope you've taken an opportunity to read through this. And we're just asking if you would make a motion to accept this to bring to the board.
Sorry, I found myself like struggling for my button. So in this, Wendy, well, Wendy's called for a motion. So I need to entertain that first. So
well, Richard, we could have a discussion before a motion.
Okay,
that's fine with me.
Okay, Jim.
First of all, this is wonderful. Like, again, I think this goes back to the Vanessa Ty description early on about the wonderful information that's provided in the packet, and to Ty's idea about linkages within the document. I think that would be helpful too, to have URLs within the document to help go to the right place. But again, fine work.
Thank you, Jim. Other thoughts around this document? Okay, so if I could have a motion, but I'm gonna ask for, when you give that motion, if you could also include that piece that Jim just said, so that there could be future additions to it as we document, with those links provided throughout the document. Okay, so calling for the motion, I have a hand raised by Chayla.
Sorry, I was late in raising my hand.
Okay.
I do have a comment. I feel like there's nothing in this document about equity, and that's concerning to me. Okay, I'm sorry, I see it now. All right. I still think that we're lacking like some teeth behind how equity fits in and how we're looking at race equity in particular as part of best practices. Just putting it out there.
Thank you, Shayla. So in my parliamentary procedure frame, there's a call for a motion. So I need to honor the call for the motion first before I can move that. But thank you, Shayla, for that. That's important.
Mr. Co-Chair, I am hearing some reticence, and I'm wondering if we need to get some feedback, written feedback from folks of what needs to be done, like the equity aspect, if we need to get a bigger bite on it. The other is, it's a best practices, it's not a policy document. So that was my concern, was why are we going to invest a lot of time writing this if we can't enforce it with ourselves and each other? So, you know, I want to make sure that we represent who we are as a community working with those experiencing homelessness. So Shayla had something else to add.
I do. One more thing. So it says that this document was developed in collaboration with both service providers and funders. I guess, again, going back to my concern here is, where are the people with lived experience of homelessness, current and recent, in developing these standards? And I think, like, I guess I really feel like we need to have some feedback from those folks, and not just like people that are staff that, or like mostly people that have current or very, very recent lived experience of homelessness need to be able to make some comment around this. And then I think I would feel more comfortable.
Sheila, can I add, this actually did go to the lived experience committee to get feedback, and the lived experience advisory group. So that did happen. I don't know if it was necessarily like reflected in the language in this document, which could definitely be changed, but we did make sure that it received feedback and was we incorporated that feedback into this document.
Okay, yeah, it says it was developed in collaboration with service providers and funders. So that's good. Thank you, Katie.
Michelle?
One of the things that I've been working on with a few other organizations is plain language and having a sister document, if you will, that's a plain language version once this is complete. I don't know if that's been brought up before, but it's of interest to a lot of people who get that version of accommodation.
Thanks, Michelle. I think the other document, and I don't see our colleague on here, that has been working on in tandem with this is a glossary document to really define. We use so much jargon in this space. And so having every single definition and word and acronym defined is something that we are currently working on and will go alongside with this document also.
Thank you, Katie. Sylvia?
Oh, hi. Thank you very much. I just wanted to add that with the work done on the best practices, we did add quite a big section on equity or equal access role. It's in the emergency shelter section. And then I have seen the glossary and I am working on it with Michelle to give some feedback from outside resources we don't work in the COC or coordinated entry. So providing feedback to the committee for that piece.
And so this is what I want to do, because like while there's a call for a motion, there is no motion on the floor. So it gives us a little bit of freedom.
If we are not getting a resounding response on this, then I think I can withdraw my motion and my call for a motion.
Yeah, no, that's what I was gonna say, because there is no motion on the
Right.
floor that's rescinded. What I'd like to offer, Wendy, is that like if you could reach out to Cricket, and potentially Cricket can have the interns from ASU do a focus group around the best practices group, as well as to Jim's original feedback, whether or not it makes sense to then also like put the links into the document, and then based on that feedback from the focus group, as well as like inserting these additional linkages, then at that point you can bring it back to us. Does that work for you?
I fully support that. I feel like not enough of us got behind what was happening with this document. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to weigh in. I also would like to have I would like to have some sort of agreement from participating groups that they will abide by best practices, not policy, but that we all agree these are the best practices to proceed, because we're responsible to each other.
Yes, it's that little p policy. It's still policy, but it's little p policy, which is big p policy. Okay, so Laura and then Johnson.
I just had a quick question, and maybe I missed it, but I also tried to do word search. Is there anything in the best practices about addressing clients in the language that they're accustomed to, meaning bilingual?
That's good. That's good.
ELP.
I see Wendy shaking her head. Okay, yeah. So that's some of the
good.
Thank you for catching that. Jocelyn?
I was just gonna mention maybe if you guys pull a focus group together to maybe have members from the subcommittees a part of that. So maybe a member from the race equity leadership team, a coordinated entry person, just so that it's encompassing of all the subcommittees and its whole.
Excellent.
I like that. Thank you. Okay, so Wendy, if you can take all that information back.
I will.
And we'll go from there. So moving forward, I now turn the meeting back over to Wendy.
Oh, so I'm busy writing notes. Okay. It's summer. We are having a very short meeting today, which is awesome for everybody, but we want to put out the request for future agenda items. And you guys have been really good about this today, about just things we need to talk about. So do any committee members have any action or discussion items for future meetings?
Chair Johnson, so a question that I had, and then maybe there could be time spent in next month's meeting, but particularly on the unsheltered NOFO, the additional NOFO, there's some language in the NOFO around things that the COC will do. If people apply for that. And so like if there could be like really some time spent to talk through that in this space, or especially like in dealing with the unsheltered, because it's talking about unsheltered, but it's really like a housing conversation. I'm sure that'd probably be beneficial for many organizations that are on this call. But because it specifically calls out the COC in different spaces in that NOFO, it would be helpful to know like what the position or the plan is going to be from the COC.
Gotcha. I will put that in my notes to Katie and Haley and Kelly and you, and we will follow up on that and figure out how to do this.
Okay, awesome. Okay, then we have a line. So, oh, it's your turn. It's not my turn. Okay, I'll let you do
Okay, I'm sorry, somebody else? Yeah, I see a lot of
Chairwoman
hands.
Johnson, to your question about agenda items or updates, the City of Phoenix General Obligation Bond committees are, I believe, meeting right now and accepting public testimony. I can go find the link. So that's a place where the one of the GO committees on homelessness and housing, there may be another word in there.
Human services, Jim.
Thank you. To provide your provide your feedback, go in there and see what they're thinking about already. And if you like it, that's great. If you can see some edits or ads of different initiatives or projects, then voice your opinion. And then maybe a recap. Ask the chair of that committee to provide a recap at a future meeting of this group, or the board, or whoever.
All the above. Thank you, Jim. Laura Scott-Nicky.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. So as we're talking about community adopted best practices, one of the things that I've been interested in is best practices for heat relief. And if there is any best practices for heat relief, I have done some research on my own, and it seems like there's a vast difference among heat relief centers and drop-in centers. So I'm wondering if we as a community can also look at that as something we can add to our community adopted best practices, and maybe if the Continuum could look at that in other areas, maybe you'd have more resources than I have seen. Just my thoughts.
Laura, sorry, go ahead.
Madam Vice Chair and Sir Vice Chair, I would say I help lead the Heat Relief Network activities at MAG across our region. And we are in conversation this week with the City of Phoenix's Heat Mitigation Office and ASU on trying to establish best practices for our region specifically, because we are in a little bit of a pickle there in that Heat Relief Network partners are all volunteer, and so we don't have any teeth to hold them to best practices, but we do realize we need to make expectations clearer before people sign up for the different levels of heat relief that are being offered, so there's more consistency. So you're right on the money with that, and we would be happy to come back to you with updates.
Great. Can I just ask, I mean, if there's a committee, I'd love to participate in that, because obviously the Salvation Army has quite a few heat relief stations.
I believe you are represented in the Cooling Center Network, which is the ASU cooling. We use different language, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
And if you are not represented in that work group, I'd be more than happy to add you to it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Laura, also Arizona Faith Network is very involved in this, and I will connect you with them as well. Okay, we're moving on. Vanessa Cartel.
Yes. So I was just wondering, I think throughout the meeting, there are suggestions and there are action items kind of put forth. I know those are being recorded in the minutes, but how are we following? What's the procedure for following up on all of those? And how are we prioritizing, for example, in the data section, we were talking about some data to look into. I understand that not all of the suggestions can be moved forward, but how do we evaluate that as a group and then make sure that there's follow-up?
Excellent.
Well, Katie, you can answer it, but then I have a suggestion, or a piece off of it. So.
I almost want to hear you first, Co-Chair Cruz. Vanessa, we kind of gather all of those different things that happen throughout the month and we bring them to agenda setting with your co-chairs. Some of them, I think we don't do as great of a job of coming full circle of, we tasked it to a different committee. And so we can do a better job of saying, we heard you, and also we task that to the data committee or whatever it may be that makes more sense. So that's kind of like the short story long of how all of those come through.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Richard. Did you want to add anything?
What I'd like to ask Katie, if it would be possible to add on the tail end of our agenda, is a recap of what the action items were that were raised during the meeting. So this way we can end with our action commitments. I think that would be helpful as well, so that they're not lost in the sauce, and it holds us to better results-based accountability.
Awesome. Vanessa, thanks for bringing that up, because we approve the minutes, but we don't necessarily always follow through on what we're approving. So if we could do a combination of that, Richard's suggestion of action item recap would be great. I'm all about the accountability, even when it hurts. All right, I don't see any other hands. Anybody have anything else to add? All right. How about comments from the committee? You guys have been doing a really great job. Is there anyone on the committee who has any other announcements or events or activities they would like to highlight?
Chairman Johnson?
Yes, sir.
So as you all know, I like to keep you abreast of the number that is currently unsheltered around the campus. This week we were at 835, but to give that a little bit of context is that at a time when our numbers are usually low, much lower. So year to date, this time last year we were at 240 people unsheltered around the campus. We are currently at 835. That number is only not in the 900s because of the fact that the county did some additional construction that removed about 100 people. So within that, just to understand like how that scales in the other communities and what that work looks like. Again, this week last year, I had 247 people that were currently unsheltered and unhoused around the campus. This week, a year later, there's I think that number was at 829 this week. So I just encourage us to continue to do work, but to work beyond just what is reaction to homelessness, because we have to be able to hit this spectrum wide to be able to get these numbers.
Anyone else? All right, want to thank everybody for their participation today. Thank the MAG staff for doing such an excellent job keeping us informed and up to the minute on what's going on. If there is no further business, oh, you know what I missed? Did we have a call to the community for comments? Katie, did we do that?
Yep, we did that at the very beginning.
Okay, well then never mind. I just want to make sure we didn't leave anybody out. With no other business, the meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.